This is Alia Mashtas and Martin Despang's show, Urban Transcendence. The setting here, which you will see in a second, is a little different this time. Jay Fidel and Alia Mashta thought we're going to spice up the show in broadcasting from around the world. We're doing this now from exactly on the other side of the world, from Dresden, Germany. And Andrea is helping us out here with the shooting, so if you can turn the camera, please, around. So we're going to give you a glimpse of the setting around us. All right, so when the camera has the microphone on, so when it's back, hopefully you can hear us again and see us again. So a little geography 101. Dresden is a city in former Eastern Germany that had been hit pretty hard in the World War II, but has been beautifully restored and had some years of GDR in between, which you remember well. And ever since 1989 has been beautifully restored and brought back to its former beauty, and maybe even better. I'll leave this up to you guys to discuss. In certain ways, yes. In certain ways, no. So then, the topic today, our guests are Matthias Ewert from the Hoka GmbH, and Yakup Kayatas, right, from Nova Wood, located in Istanbul, right, Turkey. So we have a very international scope here today. It seems to be like that. And of course, whatever we talk about should somehow relate to our islands of Hawaii. So this is the second show about the making of architecture. Last time we had our colleagues from EcoShade, who are originally from Australia, but have brought to Hawaii a potentially very climatically and culturally appropriate material of aluminum wood louver systems as a roof system. So thinking about, as we had started to think about the potential and resources of materiality in Hawaii, in a Hawaii of the 21st century, this gets us to another materiality which differently than EcoShade, because aluminum is not a local material in Hawaii, so it's an imported one that we try to make the case of something that is a positive invasive species, so to speak. Here it is about a material that in fact has a very deep tradition and roots on the island of Hawaii, which is wood. And wood has been around traditionally, historically in Hawaii. The sandalwood is a beautiful tropical hardwood native to Hawaii, which Chinese had serious interest in the past, and so it has been shipped out to the Chinese. They made beautiful shrines out of it over the time, but it left none of that on the islands. So the next wood that every Hawaiian knows is koa wood, and I'm a proud owner of this little delicate piece of koa wood. I might want to show it closer to the camera. Everyone in Hawaii knows koa wood, but this is an international show, so for us here in Germany, it's rather unknown wood. And Hawaii has a long tradition. The palace in downtown, Iolani Palace, has beautiful wooden door frames, and also the major staircases out of koa wood. Koa wood has the same sort of destiny than sandalwood. It used to be around. It is not around anymore, except in some very exclusive way. There are certain stores and shops in Honolulu that offer iPhone cases for tourists for $200. I can say I'm not involved in any of that. I just know when I walk by, I think, wow, this is quite something. There's certain watches out of koa. So it's the very last koa existing has been used in a very, very kind of exclusive way. For the common people, for everyone in Hawaii, it's not accessible anymore. And since this show, Urban Transcendence, is about the built environment and building culture, so koa for sure is not accessible anymore for the built environment. So we are here today to share with you a potential a way out, sort of a future perspective for maybe sort of reinstituting and reestablishing the culture, and also maybe a potentially business aspect of local wood for Hawaii. And that is the title, or the product, or the process of that is called TMT, not to be mistaken for TNT. TMT is thermally modified timber. And so can you both maybe explain a little bit what your access to TMT is, how you get to the TMT, and what your current relationship is to TMT?
Okay, sir.
So we offered that we're going to help a little bit with translating here, because Matthias claims to be not so language proficient, which we doubt.
I start in the profession of TMT, if I'm not mistaken, in 1998. No? And I had in my hands first piece of thermally modified timber, and take the smell and take the joy of this timber, and it was for me absolutely fascinating. It was so interesting, and the properties was so interesting for me, because we have no swelling and shrinking of the wood, and we don't have so much moisture, and this is so dimensional stability is so high. So it was very, very interesting to work with this material at first, and then there was a lot of stories in this case, how it starts, the people in the world to work with this timber, why they do this, and other very interesting property is that multis and fungis cannot destroy the thermally modified timber. This is very, very interesting. Also here in our region here, this is our moisture is so high here sometimes, and we have problems with the wood, that multis and fungis destroys wood.
That's something it shares with the tropics, where humidity is a big issue as well.
And so it was very interesting. First time I started in this business, and I was thinking I was here in Germany the first one who imports this timber. And in this time, the only production here in Europe was only in Finlandia. And so I imported first from Finlandia this timber, and we make the first projects with this thermally modified timber, and it was really nice success. The problem was always, or is always, that the timber is a little bit expensiver than normal timber. But time after time, the people start to like the wood, and for us was very important to find the right sawn timber, the kind of the sawn timber who is so interesting for treat and for sell for products. And so at first I have to find out the right timber, and then what can I do with this timber after treatment for which products. And now the situation now here in Europe is so that the mostly used timber is spruce and pine and ash. These are three kinds of timber we use for treatment, and we use this timber and the thermally modified timber for terraces, for decking, for terrace decking, and for facades. Cladding. Say we cladding. And this is, and I developed a lot of profiles in this case for easy using, for easy montage, and for bringing this product in the market.
Maybe sharing with the audience a little bit more the history of thermally modified timber. It's actually sort of known in many cultures in their indigenous times. For example, the Vikings have been treating, sort of charring the surfaces of their ships so it got more resistant to the seawater. We have many cultures that have treated their oak or hardwood piling for foundations in a thermally modified way. For Hawaii, more interesting, their indigenous sort of neighbors on the mainland, the Native Americans have sort of hardened in case where the tips of their arrows of their bow were still out of wood. They've been holding that into the fire for a while to give it more strength and make it harder. And then Hawaii being the gate to Asia, the Japanese have basically been treating their teacups in a way. Sort of, I always try to
years ago.
Or thousands of years ago. And so my way always, as an architect who is not the expert, I'm not the technical expert, I'm the one who applies it. But whenever I have to sell it and convince my clients, and we should talk a little bit more when we met, which was a while ago now, in these pioneering phases, how we sort of convinced the client. And that project turned out to be the largest facade application in the world at its time, so we talked about that later. But whenever I have to talk to someone who hasn't heard of TMT, I basically try to describe, and you guys please correct me, feel free. What it basically is exposing wood to heat. And before, obviously, it burns, because then it's no wood anymore, it's ash. And so just before you would burn it, you expose it to heat. And you can do this through different media. The media doesn't really matter. There are different processes. However, the one using a vacuum chamber and using air as the heat medium is the most preferred, or the most dominant, I would say, on the market. And you basically do that. And when you do that, what it does is that it basically transforms the cell in an irreversible way. And it basically takes out what I heard is called the crystal water that's sort of, native to the cell. It basically transforms the cell so then that water cannot get back into the cell. So that makes the wood, because water is the enemy of wood, is what you were pointing out to. The humidity, the moisture is a problem because it gives wood sort of the basis to have bacteria, which you mentioned, and fungi to nurture and grow because of the media of water. If you take out the water sort of permanently and irreversibly, there is no food anymore to these bacteria and fungi. So that's basically what it does. In an even more sort of populistic and probably less formally correct way, I'm kind of telling people that it sort of uses the resin that's in the woods, gets kind of baked, and it kind of glues everything together, and that's a very, very kind of non-professional way to explain it. But somehow it gives people an idea what happens to the wood. So the next thing I try to explain, that there are resistancy classes to wood that are found out through testing, and we are thinking about maybe tomorrow. Actually, the reason why we're here today, why we got together, is because we like each other, but also there's a certain official reason. And there is an institution here in the city of Dresden that has been here for many, many years and decades, and actually all the way through the GDR days, it has sustained and maintained itself, and it's the Institute of Wood Technology. And the Institute of Wood Technology is located in Dresden and is hosting the European Thermally Modified Timber Conference / workshop. Every other year, it's going to be here in Dresden, and it's going to be here tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Yes. And if you guys like what we're talking about, we're thinking about maybe sort of reporting live streaming a little bit from the conference tomorrow, and you will get exposed to different people around, and probably can show you a little bit of the testing facilities. And the testing facilities they have is they basically stick wood in the ground, and then they sort of artificially inject fungi and mold, and then they set a timer. And that timer basically then, looking at the timer tells you how long the wood is able to resist. That's where the term resistancy class comes, sort of the attack. And sort of after thermally modified, it significantly upgrades the resistancy class. So you're talking pine and untreated pine only, withstand so long, and after being treated, sort of it withstands it much longer, sort of like, again, populistically saying, I think a piece of pine, being heat treated is then the resistancy class equivalent to teak wood or some tropical hardwoods, which also then in the bigger picture allows you to basically make, I'm always saying the global picture of TNT, how it can save the world or significantly contribute to, is that you can make the equivalent of tropical hardwood out of any kind of local, either soft or hardwood, which we get to your business pretty soon. We're going to take a little break now, and we're going to be back after the break. I'm not sure, however, our technicians, Ian Marshall, can technically sort of, maybe the break isn't a break at that point, so then you have to forgive us.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rafi. Every week, I'm right here at ThinkTech Hawaii, 3 p.m. on Mondays. My show is Boritz's Bio Briefings. What do we do here? Well, we watch sperm swim, we see if they catch anybody, we check out the latest biosimilars, the kind that, what was his name, the guy with the bicycle? I guess we forgot his name, but he was taking EPO and other human growth factors. We'll be talking about human growth factors. You want to know where to get some? Maybe I'll tell. Anyway, you can catch me, as I said, every week right here, Monday, 3 p.m., ThinkTech Hawaii, Dr. Rafi. You can also find me on Twitter, BioInfo Medical. Or you can catch me on Facebook, Dr. Rafael Boritzer. I'll be happy to converse with you. Aloha.
Talking the global nature of our show, whenever I'm coughing here and sneezing, there's something that I used to have, and I have it again, which is seasonal atopic hay fever. It's rye and grass. One of the many benefits of the tropics is for me that I don't have that here. So I forgot about it, and so here I'm back to it. So
I don't have it also.
Whenever I have to cheer, that's why as well. So we have just talked about what happens to the wood, and you, Matthias, explained, which we always have to do to clients, that we explain to them what happens to the wood. So the treatment is permanent.
Yeah.
Whenever any kind of wood, TNT or not, is exposed to two elements, one is water and one is UV, it affects the surface, and the surface turns gray, which is a big, we both are actually doing extensive traveling and lobbying for wood in general and TNT in particular and specific. And we always have to expose the audience to the nature of wood as being, first of all, as you, Jacob, said, potentially the most sustainable building material in the world, because unlike any other material, before it becomes a building material, it is a tree, and a tree helps to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. Right. So that's just unmatched. You can't beat that with any other building material. So that's part one. And it is organic, so it's a little bit like us, it has life. Yeah. And it lives on, and so if we accept that, that's not a dead material, but something that's still, and we allow it as being, knowing what we're doing, choosing the right product, and applying it the right way, it can age in grace, which we also always hope that we can do that as human beings, So we have to do that. So whatever grades I compare, there was a great campaign of the German wood industry years ago, the Infodienst Holz. They had these old farm girl women from the Alpine regions, and they showed them in front of a bench in front of a wooden barn, and the wooden barn was gray, and they showed the wrinkles off the faces of the farm ladies, and it was just beautiful because they age. You can read the stories of their lives and their naturally aged faces, which goes a little against the tendencies in society where the makeup industry and the plastic surgery industry tells us we always have to look young, always like in our 20s. Forever 21 is a famous fashion brand in America that suggests you should do that. So we're kind of against that trend and like saying, age in grays and age naturally. Which means back to architecture directly is, I always tell my clients, once coated, always coated. So I tell them never treat your wood. And that was the reason actually we proposed one of the reasons, the main reasons, because Yakup reminded us in our break to talk about maintenance. And so we told our clients, we're going to propose a wood that you have, never say no maintenance, because that would be lying. It's like with your car, you know, you have to go through the car wash every once in a while to keep it from rusting, so you have to do something to your building. But I always say never paint it, because once painted, always painted. We talked, if you paint, depending on the paint, you know, the paint is going to get old and going to get cracks, and the waters go underneath. So that wooden school we were talking about, the only treatment is the heat treatment. And we allow it to basically, it's applied in a vertical way, and we make the analogy to the client to the bark of a tree, which also has a vertical structure. So the water is always dripping off, and the trunk dries out again, so it never molds, it never decays. And we make the case to say, you know, if you ask out of 100 people, 98 or so would probably say, we like trunk of a trees, we like a forest. So we say, let the building be a forest. But every trunk of a tree is basically aged and is grayed or green, has even some, you know, some green algae on it. As long as it doesn't get into fungi and makes the wood go mold, there's nothing wrong about it. So that's, I think, an important part. However, we know there is an audience who would like the treated surface of TMT so much that they want to keep it forever. And we can say, sure, you can do that. You can basically oil it, for example. And if you want to do that every other year to bring it back, relating back to what you said, you can also, because the graying only happens to the surface. So if you sand it down, you bring out the heat-treated dark wood surface again, and so you can go basically many ways. But most importantly is that the substance, it's a substantially perfected, improved wood is basically always there and protects the wood, and then the surface you can go either ways, right? I think that's an important part.
The positive side of TMT is that it does not need any kind of chemical to get it protected. So oiling is just a view issue.
Yeah.
If you want to see it as it was at the first day, you just oil it.
Yeah.
As you and me and everyone in the world needs, when we wake up, we have to wash our face, we have to make our hairs. It's done. So it's a nature.
Not me anymore.
Okay.
You said the show should be funny a little bit, so that reminded us of that.
And we should consider the wood as a part of ours, as a human being, as you mentioned it also in a very well way. And making the oiling is just the view. But if you leave it as it is, where we see it in Middle Europe, that the clients more like it when it turns to gray and has a nature's touch of nature. Then you can reach that, what you want, or what you are aiming.
It's perfect.
And this is how you described it in a very well way, and I just wanted to add this comment on it, so that it has a better overview of it.
And it actually, the process helps, because I'm always saying it's like the TMT is like pre-aging the wood. So it actually grays in a much more graceful way. I mean, the west facade, especially of the Omazi school, which is the wetter side.
Right.
So the beauty of the Omazi school is that it's really a showcase of what the wood, and we wanted to, because it's handicapped people, disabled people, and we wanted to show them, you know, purity and sort of, you know, the dynamics of life, and basically, you know, birth and life and death and decay, you know, in its natural circle. So we show actually the building has, you know, 4 orientations. So to each orientation, the wood grays differently. There's a covered courtyard where rain hardly gets to, so there's still like some of the original left. There's a north facade, which took a long time to even get patina. And there's a west facade, which has actually always been hit by the rain and the sun, and that's the one that's most evenly gray. It's almost like silk, you know.
Right.
It reflects, and it has a tremendous beauty to it. So I think that's you know, the way we talk, hopefully it gets across to the audience that for us it's more than a business. For us it's more than technology. For us, it's culture. For us, it's poetry, and we love the material. I always love the workshops, because you get together with people who are all weirdos in one way or another. I'm speaking for myself, of course, not for anyone. But it's just really passionate and dedicated people who believe in that being something of tremendous potential and again, rational and irrationally a way to contribute to our futures and a more happier and healthier world and also immediate environment, because that material around us just makes us happy and healthy. There's no chemicals in it. It looks good, so it's on all levels. It's really good for us.
Right.
So we want to share. I was sort of already indicating there's a potential for Hawaii. In particular, we started with Koa, which is not around anymore. So we want to share with you this vision that we have for Hawaii, which is that what if we would negotiate, debate, and decide for a species that we would grow on the islands of Hawaii. We know we have a climate where this is why tropical hardwood doesn't have any rings, any grain, because it grows continuously. It doesn't have the seasonal cycles. That's the difference. So if we decide on a wood species that grows rather fast and could grow all year round, we could sort of produce wood that we could actually use for a larger demand, and we would then heat modify that wood. So again, we can think of local resources as we talked before, basically sustainable, renewable resource. There are many. There's the wind, there is the sun, there are the waves. All these could contribute to renewable energies. If we think about the islands, there's the Big Island. The Big Island, I heard that there was some developers, some entrepreneurs who started to plant eucalyptus trees to basically for export. The cost of fossil fuel kind of didn't make this happen to the degree they wanted to, so that wood is there and is available. So one could basically start and test eucalyptus. One could also, again, grow a new species that when things would be appropriate. And then use one of these energy sources. I'm aware of that in Hawaii, all the elements are linked to gods, so one would have to negotiate with these gods. There's also Pele. Pele could be negotiated with and teaming up, and so we could geothermally modify that wood. So you already have sort of started to establish a production of a local product. It makes it already resistant against fungi, decay. There's one thing, Hawaii's paradise, it's also termite paradise. So the termites are a little tough because they love that wood still as much as we do, and they love it so much they eat it. And so we have to go a next step. And we also could once again, why we're kind of critical about wood currently on the island is because it comes from the Pacific Northwest, America, Seattle. It gets termite treated there by the most preferred and least health impacting way is the borating, which is a silicate. It gets treated with that silicate, and then it gets shipped to the islands of Hawaii on diesel ships. And so by the time it arrives, all the benefits it potentially has aren't so much anymore because they get used up by processes that are majorly involving chemicals and fossil fuel. So we're saying already by growing it locally, by treating it locally with renewable energies, we're already way ahead. And then it reminds us of an indigenous way of basically termite treating, which is floating the wood from one island to the other one, and that then went through seawater. By the time that seawater treatment has happened to the wood, it made it resistant to termites. So again, kind of reactivating that memory and history would be the last step. And again, if we think about renewable sources, borating is nothing else silicate, and silicate is salt. We got the ocean, so we use the salt in the ocean basically to go through this last step. And because the borating is the least preferred traditionally because it leaches out, so you potentially have to retreat the wood. But with a cell being modified to begin with for the TMT process, also the bore rating would only have to be applied, once or a lot lesser than conventionally. So that's sort of, we're getting closer to the end of the show, but that's our vision for the islands of Hawaii, that we can use the thermally modified process to basically sort of reinitiate the connection of Hawaii to the building material and materiality of wood. And coming back to the koa cases, that you can buy in luxurious stores. We have to be honest. I think it took us many years, by now decades, to really promote that. It's almost too good to be true. So people are always like, "Well, what's the catch?" And we're still in the process. It has picked up significantly. You have great sale successes, so it's going there. And so now in the U.S., we're going through the same kind of pioneering phase, that we first have to build up trust, and people believe in it. But I believe when we do that, the more we go and talk about it, the more we share. That's what we're doing on the show. The more people will believe it, and will share and join our enthusiasm about that product. So. Yeah, anything in addition you want to share? We hope we see you both in Hawaii soon, I also have to say, in addition to that, one of your guys' samples, Matthias always, and that was your material, very generously provided me over the years to make the case, to show it. And one of the pieces went to Les Wallach, who's an architectural friend of mine. Hi, Les. And he has a house on Maui, and took it in 2011 and basically buried it underground, and then brought it back to me. He sort of exhumed it and brought it back to me last year. So it has been tested, in a very sort of informal way, but still, sort of like a field test, like a real field test. And the good news is what's still there, and I'm going to, show it to you when you come to Hawaii. You can sort of more expertise-wise really look at it, what you've really been doing. But to me, it still looks good. It's there, and it was underground, and that's usually when wood goes away and gets eaten away and rots away, so it's still there. So even though we have not yet gone through the last kind of termite treatment stage, testing phase, it already has done pretty well. So. And hope we can spread the word and get potential people excited about it. Maybe the developers, maybe the investors who are willing to join. Asia, of course. I mean, you were asking about being a businessman, you have to be concerned about market size, and ask me about how many people live in Hawaii. The continental U.S. for sure has a larger market potential. However, there's a tropical region in Florida, for example. The whole southern belt of the U.S. pretty much has severe conditions with very, very large humidity. So this is a potentially large market. And many of the tropical regions, 40% of the world climates are tropical, and many of them are in Asia. So Asia is potentially another kind of big market. And sort of Hawaii could be sort of the kind of the stop, the kind of the stepstone towards the Asian market.
I think that could be also a good sample, let me say, for Hawaii, because we also deliver or supply our materials to many Asian countries like Singapore, like China, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, for example. And this could be also a good example, say, also for Hawaii.
All right. Well, it's getting dark here now, and Andrea points out that we're close to the allocated 50 minutes. We're gonna enjoy the beautiful scenery of the surroundings of beautiful Dresden, and I'm thanking Matthias very much and Yakup very much for having been here, and hopefully we are able to broadcast a little bit more tomorrow and the day after tomorrow from the conference itself. But I think this was an excellent sort of introduction to the audience to this fascinating new and potentially new Hawaii building material. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Hallo.